So I've enabled the chat function just to say if you are watching it, you can ask some questions. But today, this is our inaugural webinar. So I suppose I should explain who we are, why we're doing it, and what we hope to
Historic,
achieve.
I would probably add.
Historic on this historic, momentous occasion. So I'm I've been selling for close to 40 years and the MD of Lionsdown, and I've gone through different things that I've sold, whether they're intangibles and tangibles, and I'm a great student of sales and also like to train on sales as well. And Tom, a little bit of a introduction about yourself.
Yeah, so I'm the commercial director here at Lionsdown. So basically, I just look after all of the sales activity here across Lionsdown and its brands. I've been a student of Mr. Sheffers for 14 years, and have hopefully picked up a few things along the way, but still learning as I go.
Yeah. So the way we're just going to run this is we're just going to be just having a fireside chat. If you've got any questions, whack into the chat box and we can see. But we've had some questions in beforehand, so we'll just jump straight in. So the whole webinar is really about finding pain points, but ultimately it's about questions. It's about what do we do in the cell, about questions, how to ask them, when to ask them, what kind of questions we should ask, what's the point of asking questions, etc., etc., etc. So I think where we start is kind of well, what is should we ask questions? Because I've worked in different sales environments, and to be honest, we've got some people here in our company that don't really ask questions. They just pitch, they close, and incredibly successful. And we've got other people that ask questions that are also equally successful. So, well, I suppose, what questions should you ask questions?
Well, I guess the point that you're kind of saying is you can get a deal without asking a single question.
Yeah,
You can
that's
pick
true.
up the phone to someone. It may be a rhetorical question here or there or a leading question, but you can. But I guess what we're here to explore and what I guess we enjoy exploring, what do we believe is the optimal way to get the maximum value out of a sales conversation?
Yeah. So
And I
just
guess our philosophy would very much be that sales 101, really, you got to ask questions to uncover the pain points of your customers, find out what their challenges are, what their biggest obstacles are, and then you're positioning your product as something that can solve that. And if you can do that in a great way, you're going to build the most value and you're going to give yourself the best chance of securing the best possible result.
but there'll be people out listening to this that will maybe they don't. It's what happens if you're selling a single product of a low value. Is there, I suppose I always like to think you should A/B testing. So, I remember I don't know if you remember, we had this guy, Little Jeff, who sold these delegate tickets. And they were
Angry Jeff.
sometimes angry Jeff. Yeah,
Angry Jeff.
he was very angry. He was very angry. But I remember we were selling free delegate tickets and other people were doing two or three a day. And he was like rocking it. He was doing 10 a day. And I thought, this Jeff's a genius. He's angry and a genius. Um, and so I thought I'll listen to his call. I'll see what he's doing. And he's obviously a genius. So, and I listened to the call, and all he said was, he goes, "Hi, we're running a marketing event. Do you want a ticket?" Which is a question, of course. But he didn't even do any exploring. He didn't uncover lead points. He just closed, and he
It
was
was very
brilliant.
direct.
He was very direct, and he got twice, three times as much as anywhere else. So I'm thinking, asking questions, when does it apply to get the maximum?
Yeah. Well, in that scenario, he was doing high volume, low value sales.
Mm,
And it feels to me like what we want this conversation to probably be more about is higher value, more complex sales, because obviously that's, well, for me, and I imagine for a lot of people listening, that's more exciting. That's kind of where you want to get to on your sales journey, it feels.
yeah, I think
And I
so.
think a lot of the salespeople I've worked with have been very good. You start off in lower value transactional sales, which is a great foundational point for sales because it teaches you to close. But then where you want to build and develop to is a more consultative, you know, complex sales process, because then you're going to start doing the 10,000, 100,000, and even in some cases, £1 million.
Yeah, I see. So really, I suppose that I think you're right. I think if you are to get more complex sales, if you are to get bigger deals, then you really need to be more consultative, ask questions. So, so when you're having your questions, I mean, I suppose what is the point of asking the questions? Why are we asking questions in the first place?
So there's probably more than one answer to that question. But I guess in the context of this episode that we're talking about, I guess it's to uncover their pain points. And then I guess the follow-up question to that would be, well, why is it important to uncover their pain points in a sales process?
Yeah. Well, that's good. I mean, uncovering the pain points, why it's important is, I think fundamentally, there's a few brilliant books on this, but if you don't have a pain point, if there's no problem, then there's no solution. I think one of the things that I get salespeople at the beginning that are scared to ask questions because so I think that what happens is they're scared to ask questions because they're concerned that what if I don't get the answer I want? What if I don't find a problem? What happens if they haven't got a problem? And they're concerned about that as if to say, well, if I ignore that, then I would have got the deal anyway. Well, then that's just, I think that's just, they're just fooling themselves. The customer's not going to go away and go, well, I got so sold in it, I didn't even think about the problem. I also think if you read a good book is, of course, Neil Rackham's Spin book. It talks about the bigger the problem, the bigger the deal, the more compelling it is. But, you know, I think personally, I'm always a big fan of asking questions to find problems. Otherwise, what's the point? You know,
Are you an advocate of the school of that, quite an old school like saying it's like, you're either selling to them or they're selling to you. It's like, or is it the case that you should always be able to make a sale on any call? So because you mentioned you shouldn't ask a question because you might not find a problem. And it's like, well, if you ask questions and you're not finding a problem, is there a point where you can be like, well, look, the reality is, I don't think I can help you. Or do you think every salesperson should never do that? And it should be like, no, there should be like a dog with a bone. There must be something. Or do you believe there is sometimes a point where you go, okay, look, it sounds like you got it all down. I can't help you. Or like, what's your
um,
view on that? Like, do you think
I think I was trying to think of a time when I was selling franking machines, which is a machine that puts a stamp on the letter, effectively. Um, I think I'd done my research. So when I was in the appointment, I'd already done the research. So I knew there was an application. So they were sending out stamps when they could have been using a machine. So for me, there was always in that scenario an application because my appointment was set up correctly. So if you're going into a sale, which maybe it's an inbound inquiry, let's say, oh, I wonder if you can help me, blah blah blah. Then I think you can have that tact to say, look, I don't know if I can help you. Maybe I can, maybe I can't. I mean, that's always my approach anyway. But if I can't find a problem, um, then I won't be able to help them. In the world of the franking machine, of course, I knew there was a problem because they were sending out stamps. They weren't using machine. So in that respect, yeah, I agree with you
so?
as
Are
well.
you sort of saying that it's almost incumbent on the salesperson to have done a little bit of research going into the conversation and pre-qualified really that there was going to be a problem, and then it's just the conversation is about uncovering that, developing it, and then being able to position a solution.
Yeah, I think it's the way the appointment's set up. I mean, how was it set up? How was the relationship starting? And, what did you reach out to them about? So if you reached out to them and said, we're helping people with this, or which we used to call a general benefit statement, we're helping people to, in our world, we'll say we're helping you either have a stronger brand perception or we'll help you get leads or things like that, then clearly they're responding to that. Um, so there must be a problem. Getting the customers to admit they have a problem is also a challenge as well. I think one of the things is, and this is what Jack was asking before the show, was saying, how do we create an environment that makes the customers feel so much at ease that they're happy to ask your questions. Because I don't know about you, Tom, but have you been in, as people try to sell to you and then you think, oh my goodness, stop asking these questions. They're like these dumbass questions. They drive me crazy and it puts you off by.
Yeah, no,
Yeah.
I've been in that situation.
Yeah.
And I think, well, so look, because obviously we've established, I think we obviously agree, but we kind of set this up to say, look, questions are important. We need them to uncover, the wants, needs, pain points of our customers, but generally they're going to be more useful in a higher value, larger transaction deal because that may be higher, lower volume, lower value stuff. They're not as essential. So we've agreed that.
Right.
So then it's like, but salespeople struggle with it. They feel maybe a
Yes.
sense of discomfort. And so, yeah, the question you're posing is, well, how can we set this up? How can, practically speaking, then, how can we ask these questions? How can we delve and get you? Because you don't want to go straight in with a kind of maybe a
Yeah.
very deep question. So how do you kind of build that and set it up on a
Because
practical level?
that's quite interesting because we have we have a kind of template that salespeople follow. Not everyone, but a lot of salespeople follow, which is you start off with an introduction, rapport. You give the outline of what you're selling, and then we ask questions. And we've had it in situations where people have jumped in and said to me, "Why can't we ask these questions much earlier?" And they've tried it and it didn't work. So, and when I say it didn't work, I mean it wasn't as effective. It didn't work the majority of the times. Forget the exceptions; they'll always, it's always possible. You could do it a different way. So, how do I get the customer to feel at the beginning of the pitch? Really, you're looking at, as Cialdini says, reciprocity and likability. So, if they trust you, if they feel that you've got their best interests at heart and you're not just trying to sell them something, as you previously mentioned, irrespective of whether they got a problem or not, then they're going to feel comfortable answering these questions. So setting up the call, I think you alluded it to before, if you've done good research, if you've demonstrated that you've done your homework, that you're not here to waste time, that's going to be incredibly important. So in our world of advertising and if it's brand, I need to know what their competition are doing. I need to know how they're presenting themselves. I need to know what they're focusing on. And I need to have understood the type of messaging that they want to put out. And I think it's about really at the beginning outlining what we experimented with was outlining what this pitch is about, what our aim is. Because at the beginning we did used to have, you've got to listen to certain questions customers ask back. If you're getting a lot of, I don't understand, what's this about? Then don't ignore that. Write down the questions the customers ask, and then change your pitch to say, okay, let me experiment now with explaining what it's about first. So we change things to say, right, the article is going to be this length, it's going to be on our hubs on these sites, it's going to offer this, but let's see if it's right for you. So I think that
So,
was a change.
so before you even start asking questions, you've got to position yourself in a compelling enough way to get their attention to almost give you the right to ask those questions and also put them in a place where they're actually going to be engaged with those questions.
Absolutely. And I think you can do things that are clever in a sense that maybe you don't want to tell them everything. Maybe you want to um, um, maybe you want to frame things in a way that invites something. I was listening to someone the other day who was talking about um, how he could tell people he had a Porsche, a lovely sports car, without actually bragging. Right. So
Okay.
I don't know if this is good or bad to say, but he would say, "Oh well, I'd tell an anecdote," and he'd say, "Well, I was a situation where I had to, give lifts to two people because the thing is, my sports car it's quite low down, and I could only got one seat in it in the front, so I had to kind of make two trips for these old people, which invites the question, oh, what car do you have? Because it's a Porsche, but that's not the point of the story. So you've got, so with the questions that I ask and I look down what can you control? You can control the questions you ask. You can control the way you do your pitch. Um, so asking questions at the beginning, and sometimes I find asking a question at the beginning that gets a no as opposed to a yes is better than asking a straight yes question.
Why?
Right. Well, look, have we all been in this situation where, let's imagine, someone's rang you up, Tom, and they're saying, I don't know, they're selling water, for example. The first thing that came to my head as I saw you drinking.
Turn it into wine because I get a lot of people phoning up like selling me wine.
Okay. Oh, okay. I don't know what databases you're on, but let's.
During COVID, I was a member of about 4 different wine clubs, and now they won't leave me alone.
Okay, let's say that's the reason. Now, okay, so let's say someone calls you up and goes, "Hi, Tom. I'm Bradley. I work for Majestic Wine, blah blah blah." Now, Tom, you like wine, don't you? You like better wine, don't you? You know,
Yeah, I'm
you,
put off
you're a
immediately.
bit put off, and you're thinking, "Oh God, this is some cheesy salesman." Why? Wait, but why? I mean, you do like wine, but why are you put off?
I can't stand it when a salesperson finishes a question with the answer to the question. You
Yeah,
like that, yeah? And it's
yeah,
like it feels like they're trying to bully me into something, and that they're trying to corral me in a certain direction, which I, for one, don't like. And I don't think
yeah.
I probably don't think I'm alone. Someone said to me once, people like to buy things,
Mm,
people don't like to be sold things,
that's true.
And so I think you need to push them, like I don't think I'm alone, feel very put off by that.
Yeah, I wondered if they were able to ask that in a negative. I'm trying to think how I might ask in a negative way. But if they came out and said, well, obviously it's about pace as well. If they slowed down and they were saying, would it be a ridiculous suggestion, Tom, for me to think that you may like Chablis or different kinds of wine, or am I completely off the mark here? You know,
No, no, no. I'm a big fan of Chablis.
yeah. Oh, not Merlot though.
Yeah. Well, yeah, and because I know they phone me up sometimes, and they notice that I haven't ordered a box of wine for over a year. So it's like, absolutely, they haven't ordered a box of wine. Am I right in thinking you've just gone off wine?
Oh, and is that? Did they actually say that?
You're not. You say, am I? Because I don't want to waste your time. Am I right that you're not drinking wine anymore?
Yeah.
Oh no,
In
no,
fact,
I still drink wine.
actually, to be fair, and you can throw a bit of levity into it. I think one of the things, if you haven't read it, Chris Voss, Never Split Difference, would say things. Would it be a ridiculous statement to say that you've gone off wine?
So yes, you can ask a question in a certain way to engineer a no. Fine.
Yeah,
But why? Why do you want them to say no? Because that kind of goes against conventional wisdom, where you're kind of, when I first got into sales, it's like it's all about getting the little yeses all the way to the big yes. So why are
yeah,
you
it
looking
is.
to get a no?
Yeah, I mean, there is a book, I think, getting yes, 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 because you want to put people in a yes frame of mind. I think for me, there's several reasons to get a no at the beginning. I think that one, it establishes, I think people are more passionate when they say no. I listen to well, I mean, also, I know a no is more emphatic in a way. In some ways, I trust the no more than the yes. So we had one the other day. I was listening to a call, and the salesperson said something, and he goes, "Do you think that would be a benefit to you?" And they were like, "Yeah, yeah." Yeah, it would. Yeah, yeah, yeah. I think so. Yeah, yeah. And the way they said it, you thought, "No, that isn't a yeah." And generally, I find that when people say no, they expand on that. They justify the no. So when they say no, 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 because blah blah blah, it's not that. It's just that whatever, and then they'll start to expand a lot more. When yes doesn't feel, I don't know how strong that yes is. I think when you're talking to people, I find that most people they don't like saying no as well. Most people, look, look, I'm sure there are salespeople out there it's that have had yes, 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 and the customer's not done it. I mean, how many times? I think in my career, have I actually had a customer at the end saying, no, it's not for me? I very rarely get that.
I can unequivocally say, of all the salespeople I manage that speak to, the greatest frustration they have is that it's just silent. They
Yeah,
people and people will say maybe, let me think about it. Yeah, no, I like the sound of it, but their biggest frustration is like they won't. Then people don't say no; they'll just ignore them eventually.
yeah. And
And
remember, one of the salespeople used to get so frustrated when he couldn't get the customer to say yes or no that he'd say, "Make a decision,
yeah,
grow some, make
yes.
and it's so frustrating because they just go silent. So
So I guess the question is, why do people not like to say no? And I guess to your point, then getting them to say no early and
mm,
getting them to feel comfortable saying no to you is going to help you further down the line because you
uh,
want them to have you because like salespeople, aren't going to be offended if you say no. So what
correct.
you want to do is create a level of comfort with the person you're selling to that it's okay to say no to me. I want
Yeah,
you to say no to me if you're not happy.
yes,
And I know one of the top salespeople that I've ever worked with says exactly that at the outset of his
yeah,
conversations. He says, "Look, I just want to say now, if you don't want to do it, if it's not for you, I won't take it personally. It's fine. Like it's okay."
yeah,
And it's the same gentleman that made the comment that
yeah.
you were referring to
Would,
because
would
he
you?
hates he hates
Yeah.
people not making a decision, and it's a
Well,
big
I suppose you
frustration.
could set it up and say, look, well, I did have something from Sam who said to me one of the ways he tries to make the customers feel at ease. It says, look, we've scheduled say 25 minutes for this call. If at any time during this call you do not think this is going to be right for you, then please let me know because there's no point wasting time. You know, would that be okay with you? Are you
Yeah.
comfortable doing that? Or I've heard people say, would you be comfortable if it's not right for me saying no? Of course, that
So
does get a yes, of course. But
I'm I'm conscious of time a little bit because we kind of talked about how we set this up to kind of ask those questions and kind of
mm,
earn the right to ask those pain point questions. And obviously, depending on what you're selling, you're going to ask different questions in terms of the different pain points you're looking for. But I think one
mm,
thing that's important that we talk about is once you ask those questions,
mm,
then they're going to give you answers. What then?
yes,
Because I don't know. Because I think one massive weakness that I've seen in a lot of salespeople in my experience is they'll ask a really good question and they'll get a
mm,
really good answer, but then they'll just carry on. They won't
yes, oh
listen.
yes,
They won't
that
react.
absolutely,
And
absolutely. That is
so
the
what
thing
about
that
listening once you've asked
so
the question?
I agree with you. I think that is the one thing that really frustrates me. People not listening to ask the question. Like they've got their questions, they've been told ask these questions, and they simply get an answer that could be quite expansive, and then they just go, okay, great, and then they just ask the next question. So
So
how do I?
from a
Yeah,
practical point of view, what does a salesperson need to do once they ask the question and get given a gold dust answer?
yes, I think I just preface this by saying if you are new to sales, then this is very difficult because you're so focused on asking the next question that you sometimes lose the fact that you might be missing gold. Forget the questions, really. I mean, I have very four bulk. I know I'll come back to the point, but I have very four elements, which is what do you want, why do you want it, when do you want it, and what's stopping you getting there. So when you ask a question, you really got to hear what you're looking for is their needs. You're going to hear now. Sometimes it can be explicit, sometimes it's implicit, but you're really listening for subtleties in what they say in order to focus on that. So, what you want to try to do is summarize, repeat back. If you're terrible at that, then just listen to what they say at the last two words and repeat those back. But
I would also say if you're terrible at it, get better.
get better. Yeah. I mean, look,
Like practice.
yeah, I mean, the trick would be he goes, you get better, practice. What do you mean by get better and practice? So you can always, what you want to do is find out um, what their implied needs are. So they may be saying like, oh, we want to be seen as a really high profile company in database solutions, and because we've got this really strong application we'll be working for in 5 years, and when and we'd love to be this. Now, what they're really saying is they're not satisfied with the way they're seen at the moment. They have desires. And if you just go, okay, fine. But if you can use that information to repeat back, so really what you be saying, and I think there's some good starting points that you can have. We had, I like the phrase, so for you, I like to say things like that. And I like to pause quite a lot as well. So getting customers to buy in as well, which is what you want. You want commitment through the sale, and you want to say, are we on the same page when it comes to this? I will do a lot of things like, so for you, and then I pause, and then there's the customer is forced to listen. So for you, what you're aiming to do is da 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 da. And if you can give a reason with that, then you're going to have a lot stronger buy-in. So if the customer says we want to be seen as XYZ, I would say, okay, so using their answer in the following question is going to be a much better way to have a conversation. So the fact that you want to be seen as an expert in XYZ. So tell me, what's the reason why it's important for you to be seen as an expert in this conversation? Don't
And
paraphrase, repeat back literally.
what's interesting is, and this is from a lot of experience of listening to calls and doing calls, is you will often not even need to ask the question if you repeat back. So if
Mm,
you repeat back to them, okay, for you, it's about what you just said, then they will just expand. They'll just keep going. And
mm,
they'll just build on that point, and they'll get more and more engaged and excited by it. And by repeating back to them, you're not just listening to them, which is obviously critical, but you're showing them actively that you are listening to them.
yes,
That you're really demonstrating to them so they feel listened to, they feel like you get it, and then you're like you say, you're coming closer together in the pitch,
yeah,
which I think is a huge element of why it's important as well. It's not enough to just listen. You have
no.
to really demonstrate that you're listening.
Actually, and one thing I just reminded me of is, and this frustrates me when I say to salespeople, stop helping them. Stop helping your customer give the frigging answer. Really, really frustrates me. So people would say something like, okay, so what's your average order value? What is it like? 10,000, 20,000, 30,000? Stop helping them.
Yeah.
Ask the question and trust that the person you're speaking to is intelligent enough to answer it. Because if they're not intelligent enough to answer it, then you're probably talking to the wrong person. And I would say, perversely, or whatever the salesperson might think, they think, oh, I really, salespeople, strangely, but maybe it's not strange, but the perception of salespeople is sometimes that they're money grabbing, sharky. But in my experience, salespeople love to help people, and they're genuinely good people that really want to help people. But I think it's too much. And then, as my old business partner said, they end up vomiting on the customer, which is quite
And I think
a visual image.
sometimes there's a nervousness about asking a question that has the potential to make the person you're asking it make them feel uncomfortable.
Yeah.
And so it's like because if you ask them a question that they don't know the answer to, then you might make that person feel uncomfortable because they
Yes.
might have to either blag it or admit that they're a bit out of their depth here because that question's a bit above their pay grade. And so therefore you'll kind of bail out of the question a little bit to protect the person that you're asking the
Yeah.
question of. But I think a critical skill of any salesperson is you have to be prepared to risk making the person you're speaking to feel uncomfortable.
Yeah.
And
Well,
some of the best salespeople I've worked with are okay to do that because
yeah.
it's a
I think
business
so.
conversation at the end of the day.
So we had a question the other day, which is basically, what happens if the customer doesn't answer the question?
Yeah. Well, that we see that all the time as well. You ask a great question, and the customer just avoids it, well, or evades it. Kind of it gives a bit of a politician's answer to it, and I'm struggling to think of a single example where I've listened to the callback and the salesperson's gone, okay, that's interesting, but going back to the question I asked because I don't feel
Yes.
like we really addressed that and asked the question again. It's a
Yeah.
very difficult thing to do because
There are
so few
critical
people do
questions.
it.
I mean, look, there are some questions you might ask which are in the weeds, the weed question, the granularity that they may not know the answers. You might say, what I don't know. You may ask a question about an application. Okay, so could you tell me the job titles that you're trying to aim at? And they may not be able to give you a comprehensive. That's fine. You don't need to push on that. But what do you want conceptually? Do you want to invest in a stronger brand perception? Do you want more leads for your salespeople? Do you understand, the biggest problems stopping you getting what you want? These are fundamental questions. And if they can't answer those, there's a fair chance you're talking to the wrong person. And if you are talking to the wrong person, clearly, let's say you're talking to an information gatherer, then at some point you've got to make a decision. Shall I just give them enough information to go to the next step, or do I carry on? So I that would be that's a call that you're going to have to make as a salesperson.
There's a couple of pitfalls that you need to avoid that I want to ask you about though. Like, let's say you get into it and you're asking them questions. So when is enough enough? Like what? Because like you say, you can't just keep asking questions and keep asking questions.
Yeah.
What what's the direction? What's the destination? Like what's the point where you need to like say stop, summarize, and find and be like, right, okay, now let me pitch. Like where? How do you know where that point is? What's the point you're getting to?
That's a great question, because I think instinctively, um, I feel about the size of the deal as well. So if it's a reasonable size deal, and in our world, a reasonable size deal might be 15 grand, something like that, then I feel that I try to hook in on a singular based want. We want to be seen as this. These are the geographies we want to be seen in. Um, this is why we want to be doing it, and this is the biggest problem. And I try to make that a single based problem. I'm sure there are many problems, but I don't want to keep expanding because it gets too complex. I just want to make it simple, um, and then come up with a single solution that will tackle that one problem, especially if it's a new customer. I don't want to overwhelm someone. So I want it to be very simple. And if the customer's talking too much and going off on all of these tangents, which often happens, sometimes I've asked a question and the customer spoke for 15 minutes. And
That was going to be my second point. How do you deal with it? How do you deal with it when a customer just will not stop talking?
right, I just interrupt.
There's a point
After a
where you
certain
have to.
point, I just interrupt and say, "Look, I know this is really interesting, but just to let you know, I'm not an expert in quantum dynamics, and quite frankly, a lot of what you're
Don't
saying,
be modest.
I know, I know. I failed physics O levels, so that's how far I go back. GCSEs for anyone younger than 82. So,
I did GCSEs.
oh, did you? Yeah, of course you did. So for me, after a few minutes, I would say, look, I know this is super interesting. We have a whole editorial team that really understands this, and I feel a little bit silly. I'm not an expert. I'm an expert in sort of making people feel that you're the expert or see you as expert. So
Yeah.
let's talk about that, if I don't mind.
So it
Hope you
is
don't
okay
mind.
to interrupt basically because like you need to be respectful of your time, their time, and the time that's been allocated for the conversation.
Yes, I think so. But if you set up the call why, and let's say you constantly a situation, because I know we're just gone over, so I'll just make a last point. If you're finding that too many customers do that, I've got so many salespeople say, look, before we begin, let me tell you, I'm not an expert in blah, blah, blah. So I don't want to talk about the details. It's no point for me. Let's talk about your desires, your goals, blah, blah, blah. So setting the scene to ask the questions, that's the environment you want to create. And if you do that successfully, then
Yeah.
you're focusing like a boardroom agenda, like any good meeting. You need to set the parameters.
And then I
That's what I'm
guess
saying.
as a closing point to that, what's critical if you've conducted a good fact find, asked some good questions, landed on that one problem, at that point, before you move into the pitch, is being able to wrap that up, summarize that,
Summarize.
and
Yeah,
ask a closed question to confirm that you're both on the same page
yeah,
and that you've established that that's the point. And then I think it's really
yeah,
important to finish on a closed question and get the yes at that point.
yeah. I should point out actually, because if people are listening, look, your strategy should be designed on the person or the product you're selling. So with our product, which I'm being incredibly specific, it's really a 1 or 2 time close. And when you're dealing with values of 15, if I was selling products of £1 million or 10 million or 20 million, of course the process and the questions will be
Oh,
so much more complex.
you're going to have multiple stakeholders. You're going to need to bring
Exactly.
in a professional
Yeah.
sales engineers onto the call. Yeah, it's going to be a
Yeah.
much more
So
detailed
I'm
process.
I'm talking about, we sell advertising marketing campaigns. That's what I'm talking about. So if you are selling things more complex, that wouldn't apply. So it's just, what we're doing, and that's the advice I'd give for that. But look, Tom, I think that was super fun. By the way, we're doing this because we enjoy it and we have a passion for it. And there's no sponsors here. There's no commercial value to this. And
Not
quite
yet.
frankly, I'm not even sure why we're doing it, apart from just having a laugh. So, and that's good enough for me. So, hopefully, if anyone does enjoy it, leave some comments. And Tom, I really appreciate your time. We're doing this every Friday until we get bored.
Excellent. Just
Brilliant
scratching the
stuff.
surface. Thank you very
Exactly.
much, Mr. Sheffer.
Bye-bye. Bye.
Bye.